Welcome to a new edition of Inside Grand Prix. Today, the spotlight's on the race in Silverstone. But first, you can find out more about the country and its people. Welcome to Great Britain. There's probably nowhere else where a cup of tea's celebrated as much as here. In such a country ideal. Literally in British green. This formerly great seafaring nation is thrilled by the wide open spaces of the Highlands, but above all, by motor racing. McLaren, Williams and even Renault, 7 of the 11 teams are based in England, researching and tinkering away virtually on each other's doorstep in the northwest of the island.
We're all here, we all stick together because I could say naughtily we steal each other's talent from time to time, but the real reason is one of logistics and the fact, very importantly, that very many of our suppliers are also in this area. Again, who came first I can't tell you, but I would imagine the teams came first and the suppliers followed them.
London, the centre of the British Isles. The metropolis is the capital city and its landmarks are an icon of the former empire. A pulsating city with British coolness, culturally cosmopolitan and chic. Silverstone is quite remote, almost 2 hours away by car. Wicked tongues even whisper that it's miles from anywhere. But everyone knows this is where British motor racing feels truly at home.
Yeah, of course it is like a second home race for me, being in the UK. I've been here for 10 years now, so I have a lot of friends here in England, and even though I don't spend a huge amount of time in England, but that's where I've chosen to base myself, and racing in Silverstone was one of the first times I drove a racing car in Europe, was at Silverstone.
Silverstone, the first ever Formula One Grand Prix, was held here on May 13th, 1950, and the flair of those days is still ever present. The love of motor racing goes on unbroken. Right up until the present day, it's all about speed and fun. The British are regarded as motor racing fanatics, and in some things, slightly eccentric. Yes, I think it's a completely different world. I still think I have to get used to it a bit more, because I'm more used to the Italian way of doing things. But the British certainly have their own special sense of humor, which can be really, really funny. But I still need to get used to it a bit more. The British Grand Prix. Now, once again, a huge attraction for many fans. Last year at the race, the grandstands were sold out, with more than 100,000 spectators. Normally, the English, Scottish, Welsh and Northern Irish set great store by their independence, but they're all united as they look forward to Formula One at Silverstone. Coming up in Safety Focus, Speed Boulevard, the busy activities in the pit lane. But first, a lap on the traditional circuit at Silverstone. Silverstone, in between London and Birmingham. Once an airfield for the planes of the Royal Air Force. For 56 years, it's been an official Formula One circuit. Unofficially, Silverstone's most notorious hazard, the British weather. A disadvantage for some, an advantage for others. Yes, the rain can be catastrophic. We went testing many times at Silverstone during the summer, and all it did was pour down. Every day you could almost guarantee it would rain. It was a catastrophe, and it's undoubtedly also highly likely that it will rain at the race. That's the way it is. You simply have to accept it and make the best of it. I normally do very well in the rain anyway, so I'm looking forward to it. It makes no difference to me. When it rains, the asphalt loses its grip and is very slippery. Another challenge comes from the fast corners, especially Beckett's. Gusts of wind often sweep across the track here. As you go through the corner, you've got to stay alert, or the car will soon tend to understeer. After the start, Stowe corner, foot down and attack along Hanger Straight. Silverstone, I think, doesn't give you many chances to overtake. One good opportunity is probably Hanger Straight at the back. After the fast corners here at the start, only in the fast corners you can't get up close, of course, as your car's aerodynamics are ruined if you're driving right behind someone else. This here is therefore the best chance to overtake, but at the same time it's not really a good chance. Nevertheless, only he who dares wins, so it's time to seize the chance and speed up to 300 kilometers an hour. Next comes Vale, then it's down to 80 into Club Corner, a left-right combination, at the end of which the throttle is again opened all the way. We now come to the final third of the circuit, a section with one tight corner and several short straights, calling for a sensitive touch from the hands and feet. A few years back, Michael Schumacher said no matter what he did, his teammates somehow got through here quicker, or so I heard. And sometimes odd too. You can do all sorts of weird things in that section, as there's such long, crazy corners where you're going really, really slow and you've just got to wait with the understeer and everything. Then you've simply got to try and try until you find the right line. The exciting search for the ideal line, en route into the stadium complex. Last corner, second gear, about 100 kilometers an hour. Then away, speed up, and the final dash. Now to the current championship standings. Alonso is extending his lead in the Drivers' Championship, having won for the first time in Monaco. So congratulations to him. In the Constructors' Championship, it's as you were. Renault marches on. In a moment, British innovations in Formula One 30 years ago. But now, two drivers from the island. David Coulthard and Jenson Button. Two drivers, two personalities, with a few things in common, and yet so different. For David Coulthard, it's already his 12th season. Last year, he caused quite a stir with the fun-loving Red Bull racing team. But the Scots Formula One debut in 1994 occurred under tragic circumstances, as replacement driver at Williams following Ayrton Senna's fatal crash. In '96, a switch to McLaren Mercedes. Yet with the Silver Arrows, he was always in the shadow of Finnish teammates Mika Häkkinen and Kimi Räikkönen, no matter how much this gentleman exerted himself. But as Red Bull's first driver, Coulthard now clearly has his nose in front. Coulthard, team leader and team player.
The process that we've been going through with Red Bull over the last year is to increase the capacity of the team. That means more people, to have better resources, to improve production and ultimately design and build the best car. So obviously the introduction of people like Adrian Newey and Mark Smith and all of the various other people who've come from various other teams is to create a winning structure for the future. And that's been fun to be part of, because I wasn't a part of that in a team like McLaren Mercedes.
Jenson Button's Formula One career also began at Williams. In his first season in 2000, he was thus already in a top team. In 2004 and 2005, he twice signed contracts for teams for whom he later no longer wanted to drive. Williams and BAR. In 2006, in the cockpit of the reformed Honda team, Button now finally hopes to taste success and win his first race.
It was a very difficult year in 2005, but when we realised what our problems were, I think we put them right, and very quickly as well. So scoring points in the last 10 races, I was the only driver to do that on the grid. So we can turn things around very quickly, which is important in Formula One. And I think the experience of us all doing that has made a big difference for 2006.
With 13 Grand Prix victories, David Coulthard is one of the most successful drivers in the current field, and one of the most experienced. The 35-year-old also takes challenges away from the Formula One track in his stride. His number one passion is also unshakable. He proudly flies the flag for his roots in the Scottish Highlands.
I'm constantly reminded that I'm Scottish because I have the Scottish helmet and have the Scottish flag on my race suit and on the side of the car. Quite honestly, having lived away from Scotland since I was 18 and having lived in Monaco for the last 10 years, But yeah, I guess if the war starts, then I'll go back and I'll defend Scotland. But there is no war in Europe right now, and so I feel very European.
Get on it.
Jenson Button, born 1980 in Frome, England. He's a bit like the Robbie Williams of motor racing. He loves the limelight, and the cameras love him. All he's lacking is a #1 hit. But the 26-year-old isn't getting cold feet yet, and won't let himself get knocked off track. Instead, he remains full of fighting talk, despite his modest race results.
I'm not interested in 11 or 12, really. I'm only interested in one number, and I think we know what that number is.
Jenson Button and David Coulthard, two drivers from Great Britain, two personalities aiming to show, at Silverstone especially, how good they really are. Coming up in Safety Focus, everything about the pit lane. And now in Techno, a look at the Formula One factories. From outside, they look wholly inconspicuous. The holy halls of Formula One, the backbone of Grand Prix racing. This is where the superbrains tinker, test and try new ideas, all in top secret. A Formula One car consists of around 5,000 individual parts, from simple screws to electronic modules to chassis and chassis components. It takes a lot to make a car competitive. Workshop, test and race teams are constantly in discussion.
There is a lot of dialogue between the three, particularly the factory and the test team. And we will have regular meetings about things that have gone right and things that have gone wrong, particularly with the test engineers. They spend a lot of time going through the data and analysing what has happened, and then they feed that back to the designers about which direction they want to go in.
In the tough battle for every second, aerodynamics plays one of the key roles. Better grip, for example, is 80% achieved via aerodynamics. There are 20 different possible settings for the rear wing and around 100, no less, for the front. This fine-tuning is carried out with strict limits ahead of every race.
Formula One cars are set up to regulations. There are prescribed sizes that you're allowed to build the Formula One cars to. These are width, length, height. Also, there's certain areas where you're allowed to put wings, appendages, there's certain strengths that they're supposed to be, and the flat patch is simply like having a rule or a vernier gauge or a micrometer. It's a measurement point, and it gives you a 0 point to measure. You simply measure to make sure that you are within the prescribed regulations.
Another key issue is the car's weight. FIA rules say that it has to be at least 605 kilos at the race. Light, tough and durable, the attributes sought in all materials. To achieve this, the works engineers often use carbon fiber, a composite material that's twice as rigid and 5 times lighter than steel. After every Grand Prix, a great deal of work has to be done to see how the individual components have come through the grinding, flat-out exertions of the race weekend.
After the race, the cars are stripped in the garage, and we check the gearboxes and suspension parts and boroscope on the engine to make sure it's okay. Then everything gets sent back to the factory. The engine is sealed by FIA if it's the first race of a 2-race engine. And then you come back here, strip everything, fuel cell, power steering, everything else to make sure that it's okay. And then rebuild it, and then it's fresh again, ready to go.
Done with inspiration and speed. Hidden from the glare of publicity, far away from the Grand Prix circus, the foundations are laid for top performance and exciting races for Formula One fans all over the world. Time for a short break, but we'll be right back with all the key facts on the British Grand Prix. In Safety Focus, we'll explain to you everything about getting a top performance in the pit lane. Don't go away.
Allianz, Insurance and Asset Management. Allianz, Insurance and Asset Management.
Welcome back to Inside Grand Prix. Coming up, news and facts. But first, in Safety Focus, the hot spot of the pit lane. The Speed Boulevard, the track beside the track. At some point, every driver comes in here, the pit lane. Pressure and concentration, searching for hundredths of a second. Perfect pit lane performance starts even as you enter. For just as you slow down, everything has to happen very, very fast.
Es gibt einige Regeln, wie zum Beispiel die.
There are a few rules such as the speed limits in training and then in the race, which it goes without saying are very important.
Wichtig sind, was aber auch wichtig
However,
ist,
what's also important are the practices that have evolved in the pits over the years.
in der Arbeit in der Boxengasse
You
eingebürgert.
should do your utmost, for example, to avoid driving into the wrong pit or inadvertently running over any mechanics who happen to be in the
Oder
way.
irgendwelche Mechaniker, die im Weg stehen.
This has unfortunately occurred in the past, and therefore the teams now only actually stand in the pit lane during the race when their car's about to pull in.
Stehen während dem Rennen.
And after the stop, they retreat back into their pit.
Und dann ziehen sie sich wieder zurück in die Box.
In the past, it was quite spectacular. Drivers used to shoot straight towards the awaiting mechanics, judging everything by eye, orders, supervision, safety measures. At pit stops in those days, nowhere to be seen. Instead, it was as hectic as on a fairground. Test your strength. The wheel spokes were adjusted using brass hammers. Many a pit stop degenerated into chaos, not infrequently playing with fire. However, the racing enthusiasts just didn't care. Foot down, drive on by and back into the race. Unimaginable today. Safety is now taken very seriously. There's a strict speed limit in the pit lane, making it all the more important for drivers to brake at precisely the right time.
Arriving in the pit lane as fast and aggressive as possible to the speed limit line, the control line, which is 100 kilometres an hour at most circuits. Some tracks it's 80 k's an hour. And some tracks also have different entries into the way to get into the pit. You have a chicane at Melbourne and Suzuka. You have a very quick little entrance filter lane, if you like. So every track has its own little challenge to get into the pit lane, and it's up to the driver to practice that. And then once we're in the pit lane, of course, then we're concentrating on the stop, and like you say, the stop in the box, making sure that we're in the right position for Matty on the fuel rig, to get the fuel rig in position for him, because it's very heavy. It's not easy for him to move around, so if I'm out of position, it's not good for him.
Once the car's in position, it's all down to precise timing. During refueling, the hose must be correctly in place, allowing flammable fumes to be sucked away. Wheel change 2 seconds. And when the lollipop man gives the OK, they're off. And exiting the pits, you have to press the button just right when you're dead on the line so that you get as much acceleration as possible. But leaving the pits, we've seen many a driver lose a race, all because of that stupid white line. The white line is there to prevent crashes and ensures the drivers don't race out blindly in front of their rivals. However, pit lane and garage aren't just stopping off points for cars for during the race. It's here that the teams also evaluate comprehensive data analysis and gain new insights. The cars are meticulously prepared for the decisive moment. Intensive teamwork takes place here even before qualifying. Communication and interaction are the key. In pit next to pit, the teams fine-tune their cars. The setup contest ahead of the race. Success is measurable, and success determines how the pit lane garages are allocated.
This is set by where you finished in the championship the year before. Different circuits have different positions. If you won the constructors' championship, you're allowed to have normally the first garage or pick the best garage to be in. The rest of the teams have to follow suit.
The Speed Boulevard is always a spectacle in itself. The track beside the track. And yet, right in the thick of it when the battle for seconds is raging. Now we continue with our series, Formula One 30 years ago. 30 years ago, it was above all two teams from England, the motherland of motor racing, that were setting the standards in Formula One. Both had long since grown out of their garage owners' existence of the 60s. Tyrrell with its revolutionary P34 type and its double front axle, and McLaren with its characteristic red-white colours. The Tyrrell looked completely different from any other car in Formula One. The legislators in top-class motor racing had not anticipated that a designer would deviate from the well-established pattern of having two wheels at the front and two at the back. However, the P34 had all the components in the front chassis area doubled: the brake discs, the air ducts and the suspension.
Normally, with a normal four-wheel drive car, if you build a narrow track front car, then it won't go around the corners. So we put a second axle behind the first axle to retain the cornering.
It's not the six wheels that's the more effective. Because we've made the car very narrow in front, we had to make up for that, because if a car's narrow, it doesn't go around corners. So we put more rubber on the road. And that's the theoretical reason. It's going to be fast down the straight because it's narrow, and it's going to be fast around the corner because it's got more rubber.
The design proved to be a success as Jody Scheckter and Patrick Depailler scored points in 14 of the 16 races, achieving 12 podium finishes compared to only 2 complete failures. Tyrrell even scored a 1-2 in Sweden, and so were one of the few teams who could beat Ferrari and McLaren. When McLaren signed James Hunt just before the start of the season, it was regarded as a surprise because the red-white cockpit was highly sought after. Many insiders thought that team boss Teddy Meyer's decision was a mistake because they believed that James Hunt lacked the necessary seriousness for Formula One. He was regarded as a playboy and a womanizer. However, the opinions in the drivers' camp soon changed when the Sonny Boy won his first of a total of 6 victories. Hunt drove the season of his life. The McLaren M23 proved to be hugely reliable. Only twice did technical problems stop Hunt and his teammate Jochen Mass from finishing in the points. The success story of McLaren in Formula One continued to the present day. A total of 8 World Championship titles for the drivers speaks for itself. Ken Tyrrell, on the other hand, had to give up and sell in 1997 because of financial difficulties. But 2 World Championship titles also secured him. The visionary and engineering genius, a place of honor in Formula One history. And now for our news and facts. Who's drive next at Renault? The cool Spaniard is racing from victory to victory again this year. But one question remains unanswered. Fernando Alonso is leaving for McLaren at the end of the season. So who's going to take his place? Flavio Briatore added to the rumours in Monaco by heaping generous praise on Williams driver Mark Webber for his efforts in the Principality. On top of that comes the fact that Briatore manages the Australian, whose contract with Williams ends this year. The driver merry-go-round is also turning at BMW Sauber. What's happening with Jacques Villeneuve and where he'll be in future is uncertain. Peter Sauber gave the Canadian a contract 2 years ago, which runs out this autumn. Although BMW are satisfied with what he's done, they're evidently not thinking seriously about extending the contract. That could spell the end of his career, as no other teams are currently expressing interest in the 1997 world champion. Kaltbann's status quo belonged to England, like Silverstone to the Formula One calendar. And as that's the case, the lads will be giving the full rock and roll treatment after the race on the 11th of June. The concert's taking place in an arena in the middle of the Silverstone complex. It's also planned that several of the drivers will join status quo on stage. Who that will be and whether they'll actually rock along with the group remains to be seen. Stars, cars and guitars, rocking all over the world at Silverstone. And now for our brake facts. The brake point going into Stows is one of the hardest at Silverstone for the Brembo engineers. The speedo drops from 315 to 125 kilometers per hour. The drivers cut this speed in just 1.3 seconds. The brake discs warm up in the process to as much as 800 degrees. That was Inside Grand Prix. We'll see you again for the Canadian Grand Prix.
This program was brought to you by Allianz, your global partner for comprehensive insurance and asset management solutions.